Hey there, I'm Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to talk about DNFing. This is the DNF tag that was created by Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and I'll leave a link to their original video down below along with all of the questions. And I was tagged by Emma from Drinking by My Shelf, as she mentioned that I never talk about DNFing, so nobody knows my thoughts on DNFing, and I would like to actually talk about this because that is something I wanted to discuss with you guys. The first question is, obviously, do you DNF? And the answer to this question is not really. Now, I'm not saying that you should not DNF. I actually think DNFing is very, very healthy, but I just don't end up doing it much for a number of three reasons. The first one being is that I pause books a lot. I start books and then I kind of just get distracted by other books and I press pause on that book and then I say I'll get back to it later. And here's the thing, I always get back to it later, whether that be in a number of days, in a number of weeks, or in a number of months, or even in a number of years. But there has never been a book that I paused and I didn't actually get back to. I know that some people do call that DNFing because you did not finish it in that moment and you intend to finish it in a later moment, which is technically what did not finish means. But because I like to call that pausing rather than DNFing, I don't count that as DNFing personally. The second thing that I do is I have some books that I don't actually want to finish reading physically, so I switch to audiobook. And I'm not a very good audiobook listener. I tend to drift off a little bit, I tend to not focus for all of it, so I kind of use audiobooks as a way to get through books that I do want to finish but don't want to DNF. And it's kind of the equivalent to skim reading because I do focus enough to get what's happening and to follow the story, but it's not as much avid attention as if I was reading physically, and I do this with a number of books that I did like but want to finish for whatever reason. So then I end up finishing books that I know a lot of people would DNF if they got to the point that I got to. And thirdly, I also like to trash or hate read things. So for example, with The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which I thought was awful, it was so bad that it was funny. Again, it's kind of like watching the Twilight films where they're just so cringe that you end up laughing a lot. The same thing happened for The Hating Game. It was so bad that I found it absolutely hilarious and I did get some enjoyment from reading it, even though I acknowledge that it's a very, very bad book. My sense of humour tends to fall into that category more often than not, so even if it's a bad book, sometimes I finish it because it's entertaining. So as long as it's bad, not the boring kind of bad, I will keep reading it. But that doesn't mean I never ever DNF. It just means that when I DNF it, it's a really, really bad book. The next question is, if you DNF a book, does it count towards your final goal for the month? And the answer for that is no. If I DNF a book, I just don't mention it on my channel or in my wrap-ups at all, often because I just don't want to focus on DNFs. I just want to talk about the books that I do read. I often read enough books for me to have enough to talk about when I'm just talking about the books I do read, and I'd rather just forget them entirely. Like, I DNF'd it for the reason that I didn't like it, so I just don't even want to think about it. So I often just DNF it and it's gone, it's done, it's finito, and you guys aren't going to hear about it and I'm not going to think about it or give it any more of my headspace. Is there a difference between DNFing and just putting it down for a bit? As you can see, for what I do personally, there is a difference, but I'm not saying that's a rule that has to be for everyone. You do what you like. 4. What popular books have you DNF'd? So I kind of looked back across all of the books that I've ever DNF'd that I can remember, because as I said, I keep no record of them, so I don't, you know, have a deep memory of books that I DNF'd, and I could think of 5. There are 5 books in total that I can remember ever DNFing. One of them was from my childhood and the other 4 are more recently. So the one from my childhood is The Darkest Plains by... Who wrote the Mortal Engine series again? But yeah, when I was younger I really loved the Mortal Engine series, but then I got to The Darkest Plains and it was so incredibly boring that I just gave up on the series entirely. I think that's the last book in the series. I just couldn't even bring myself to complete the series. That's how boring that last book was. The other one is Crazy Rich Asians. I started this as I borrowed the ebook from my library, and then it came to the time when I should return it because the next person wanted it, and I decided to just let it go. I think I would have actually gone through and finished it if it was a do-in, but once I let it go I was like, actually I never want to get back to it. I didn't like it because I felt like the author wanted to write an economic commentary on rich people and their lives, but he realised that it would go down better if he added fictional characters, meaning more people would read it and it'd be more readable. Which is the truth, but I don't think that melding of those two things worked, and it just led me with reading a very dry text that was all about economics while simultaneously having characters that felt like robots and didn't feel like they had any emotions to them, so I didn't enjoy reading that one. The other one is The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. It had a very, very interesting concept and an interesting use of magic, but I found it to be incredibly dry and incredibly boring, and it wasn't standing out from any of the other fantasy books I read, so I decided I would not be finishing it. The next one is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I know this is another popular one, but I started it and I just thought it was so dry. Nothing mattered to me. The characters felt very 2D and flat, so they weren't interesting, and the mystery of the plot just wasn't making me feel pulled to know more, so I decided to just ditch that buddy read and stop reading, and I'm never going back to that one. And then last but not least, we have Zenith by Sasha, Alsberg and someone else. It was co-written. I read the first chapter, it was on my TBRs once, and I just never got further than that first chapter because the writing was an absolute mess and the world building was an absolute mess, and then I checked out reviews and that mess just continued all the way through the book, according to reviews, and I was like, I just don't want to invest my time in this. So that was the fastest I've ever DNF'd a book. And yeah, those are all the books that I can remember ever DNFing. What book do you wish you had DNF'd? And this is very, very easy for me to say. That is Black Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James. I read this last year or the year before, and it was my worst book read of the year. I don't know why I pushed myself to finish reading it, because I knew I wasn't enjoying it from chapter 1, and yet I still finished the book. I kept thinking, I hope it gets better, I hope it gets better, I hope it gets better, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. So nope, no thanks. That one should have been a DNF. And also The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. That book is awful because it's praised as being an anti-racism book, and it is like one of the most racist books ever. I had to read it for class, and I typically always make myself finish my class reads, but I kind of wish that I hadn't. Oh, that makes me remember. I did DNF Utopia for class. That's the only class book that I ever DNF'd because it was the most dry, most boring thing I've ever read. Do you ever reattempt to read a DNF? Has this ever been successful for you? I wouldn't attempt to reread any books that I have officially DNF'd. Those like 6 books that I've DNF'd in my life. Yeah, I'm never going back to that. But if you count the books that I pause, then sure. What do you do with books that you DNF? Unhaul them. I don't have space for them on my shelves. Actually, most of the books that I've DNF'd have been books that I borrowed from the library or have been ebooks, so I feel like I secretly knew at some part in my head that I probably wouldn't actually like them, but I still wanted to give them a try anyway, so I got them by means which, you know, you can just delete the ebook or you can just return the library book. But Black Leopard Red Wolf, which is a book I should have DNF'd, I owned a physical copy of, and I just unhauled. I unhaul anything that I give 1 or 2 stars immediately, so they're just going. Do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNF? As someone who doesn't DNF often, I still feel like I take, I wouldn't say risks, but fairly risky, because I read quite a lot of age audiences and quite a lot of genres. It means that there's definitely going to be times I come across things I don't like. So I don't think it stops me from taking risks, just because of the fact that I read such a variety that I feel like everything's fairly a risk, because even though I know what I do like, I don't particularly know what I don't like. I don't know what makes a book entirely boring for me. Oh, and that was the last question. The next question is just to tag people. So I'm going to tag a few people I'd love to hear from down below. I can't think of who to tag at the moment, and I don't know who has and hasn't done this. So future Olivia Savannah, that is a job for you. But please let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree or disagree with anything that I've said here? Do you DNF? Or if those questions are a bit much, what was the last book that you DNF'd? And you know what? I'm actually in favour of DNFing. I'm someone who doesn't DNF a lot, but I really think it's a good and healthy thing to do, and I promote more people doing it. It's not like I have a rule where I say, I never DNF. It's just that I happen to not do it very often at all. I don't know what that makes me. Someone who has the option but doesn't often take it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. And don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say. Onwards and upwards. Excelsior.